Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. North Korea warns the US and European nations against bringing its recent missile launch to the UN Security Council. With the cautionary words going unheeded, the meeting will go ahead as planned within 24 hours. A statue remembering the victims of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women goes back on show at Japan's biggest art festival. It was removed over 50 days ago, following protests by far-right groups in Japan. Plus, the Nobel Prize for Medicine has been given to a trio of scientists from the US and the UK, whose research could be the key to understanding diseases such as cancer. Our top story this morning, North Korea's ambassador to the UN says it wouldn't necessarily be in the best interests of the US and EU nations to raise the issue of the regime's recent missile test at the UN Security Council. The remarks come as the Security Council is slated to hold a closed-door session to discuss the North's recent firing of what appeared to be a sea-based platform ballistic missile. Our Isung-jae starts us off.
North Korea's top envoy to the UN, Kim Sung, warned the United States and European nations on Monday, saying that raising the North's recent missile test at the UN Security Council would push the regime to further defend its sovereignty.
We know well that the United States is behind the impure moves of the UK, France, and Germany. The United States and its followers should bear in mind that if they raise the issue of our self-defensive measures at the UN Security Council, it will further urge our desire to defend of the sovereignty. So we will sharply watch every move of the United States and UN Security Council. I thank you for your attention.
Asked how the North plans to defend itself, Kim said to carefully watch what the regime will do in the future, but stressed that it does not mean the launch of another missile. The remarks came a day before the UN Security Council is slated to hold a closed-door meeting to discuss the North's latest test last week of a sea-based platform ballistic missile, as requested by Britain, France, and Germany. The three countries cited North Korea's violation of UN Security Council resolutions that banned the regime from using ballistic missile technology. Despite the North's protest, the 15-member council is due to meet behind closed doors on Tuesday, local time. Isung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's top nuclear envoy says he will meet his American counterpart Stephen Biegun this week to discuss ways to continue the momentum for talks between North Korea and the United States. Speaking to reporters upon his arrival in Washington on Monday, Lee Do-hoon, special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, stressed that Seoul-Washington coordination is crucial if they are going to find a solution to the nuclear impasse. Although last weekend's working-level denuclearization talks in Stockholm broke down with no progress made, he insisted North Korea and the US left room for future dialogue. He will also meet his Japanese counterpart during his four-day stay in Washington. The director of the US Missile Defense Agency has expressed hope South Korea and Japan will be able to resolve their differences over Seoul's recent decision to terminate a military information sharing pact with Tokyo. Speaking at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington on Monday, Vice Admiral John Hill stressed the importance of allies sharing military information with each other. Asked whether the three countries could continue to share military information going forward, Hill said it was possible, adding it's crucial in defending against possible ballistic missile attacks. Now, President Moon Jae-in, during a weekly cabinet meeting at the top office, is likely to discuss the main problems affecting South Korea's economy. The president may call on Parliament to help process bills directly related to the economy and people's livelihoods. In recent months, multiple economic organizations and research institutes have downgraded South Korea's growth outlook over the slowing global economy and a fall in domestic consumption, not to mention the recently soured relations with Japan that took a toll on a great many local businesses. South Korea is also projected to suffer a sharp fall in its trade surplus due to growing trade protectionism around the world. And President Moon has once again reiterated the need to overhaul the nation's all-powerful prosecution. Meeting his top aides on Monday, President Moon pointed out while people taking to the streets to express their political opinions is a positive thing, he stressed that it must not be used to deepen divides within society. Park Hee-jun has this report.
President Moon Jae-in warned that differences in political opinion should not result in a deep political clash. At a weekly meeting with his top aides on Monday, President Moon brought up the candlelight demonstrations for the first time. According to Moon, the demonstrations, some demanding reform and others calling for the expulsion of controversial Justice Minister Cho Guk, are not signs of division. Rather, they're a show of direct democracy that complements the representative democracy system. But he expressed concerns over the vigils potentially turning into a severe confrontation.
다만 정치적 의견의 차이가 활발한 토론 차원을 넘어서서 깊은 대립의 골로 빠져들거나 모든 정치가 그에 매몰되는 것은 결코 바람직하지 않을 것입니다. 많은 국민들께서 의견을 표현하셨고 온 사회가 경청하는 시간도 가진 만큼 이제 문제를 절차에 따라 해결해 나갈 수 있도록 지혜를 모아주시기 바랍니다.
Asked whether President Moon was implying that the people should refrain from further demonstrations, a senior Blue House official said it's up to the press to interpret his remarks. Saying that the public is united in its demands for the prosecution's reform, Moon reminded the Ministry of Justice and the prosecution that they need to work together to make it happen. Such a message comes a week after the president ordered the prosecution to draw up its own reform plan. It ups the pressure on Prosecutor General Yoon Sung-yeol, who has been blasted for the extensive probe into the corruption allegations surrounding Minister Cho and his family. President Moon is seen to be trying to use this momentum to push ahead with his reform drive. He instructed Parliament to hasten the legislative process for creating an independent body that investigates high-ranking government officials and transfers more investigative rights to the police. During the meeting, President Moon also assured the people that his government is doing its best to repair the damage caused by Typhoon Mitak. With more typhoons heading this way, he called for close coordination with local governments to strengthen safety in disaster-prone areas and facilities. And he said the country is doing its utmost to contain the African swine fever and stop it from spreading south. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics saw its operating profits rise on quarter in the third quarter, but the profits were down sharply from the same period last year. According to its preliminary earnings report released on Tuesday, Samsung Electronics recorded operating profits of some $6.4 billion in the July to September period, up 17% on quarter. Sales amounted to some $52 billion, up 10% on quarter. On year, though, operating profits were down 56%, while sales were down 5%. However, during the same period last year, Samsung Electronics posted some of its largest ever profits and sales. Deputy trade negotiators from the US and China have launched a new round of talks as the two sides look to end their trade war, but neither side appears open to giving up any ground, at least yet. Around 30 Chinese trade officials, led by China's Vice Finance Minister Liao Min, went into 2 days of negotiations at the US Trade Representative's office on Monday. These talks will be followed on Thursday by the first minister-level trade talks in more than 2 months. The White House says the two sides are discussing issues involving forced technology transfer, intellectual property rights, services, non-tariff barriers, agriculture and enforcement. In August, Japan removed a statue that represents the victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery from its biggest international art festival, following orders that were handed down by Japanese officials. 65 days have passed since its removal, but from today, the statue is back in and will stay there until the festival wraps up next Monday. Wang Zhonghwan has this report.
Following threats from ultra-right Japanese protesters and pressure from the Japanese government, the Comfort Woman statue at the 2019 Aichi Triennale International Contemporary Art Festival was pulled out just 3 days after the festival's opening. But the exhibition starring the statue will resume from Tuesday and run through the end of the festival on October 14th. The agreement to return the statue came during a hearing at the Nagoya District Court, held as part of mediation after a demand was filed in mid-September, seeking a court injunction to reopen the collection. Aichi Governor Hideaki Omura, who is also the chairman of the festival's organizing committee, agreed to 4 conditions as necessary for the reopening. They include cooperating with security measures, implementing a pre-reservation system, and limiting visitors to 30 people per time slot. The exhibition will also need to provide visitors with an interim report on the background explaining the closure of the art show. Upon hearing the news, Nagoya Mayor Takashi Kawamura criticized the agreement, saying it was outrageous to showcase political works at an art festival hosted by the city and other public entities. The mayor previously sparked outrage when he demanded the exhibition be shut down, arguing the statue could give the impression that Japan accepted South Korea's claim that the women were forcibly taken by the Japanese military during the war. Ironically, 2 weeks ago, Japan's Cultural Affairs Agency withdrew a grant for the festival worth approximately $720,000, saying the Aichi government had failed to provide necessary information when applying for the subsidy. The back and forth over the Comfort Woman statue has been a sticking point in South Korea-Japan relations, which have recently deteriorated to a low not seen in years due to disputes over trade and compensation for wartime forced labor. Won Jong-hwan, Arirang News.
For the first time in more than 50 years, Hong Kong's leader recently used emergency powers to ban the wearing of face masks at the city's ongoing pro-democracy protests. Now, there's speculation the face mask ban is merely the beginning of further expanded emergency powers to be announced in the coming days and weeks. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Da-mi. So Da-mi, tell us more.
Right, Mark, the escalating tension in Hong Kong is now sparking concerns that Hong Kong government may expand its colonial-era powers. According to Hong Kong legislator Claudia Mo, Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam is using the powers as a weapon of mass destruction to nuke Hong Kong so it can pave the way for more oppression. The powers can grant the government power for everything from curfews to confiscations and even censorship. There are now rumors that authorities will expand the time of custody from the current 48 hours to 96 hours, block message apps or websites used by protesters, or even disrupt internet service in the city. With a Hong Kong court rejecting bid to suspend the face mask ban, fears are rising that the city may be sliding toward martial law. Hong Kong Secretary for Justice Teresa Cheng refused to comment, but emphasized that the government was considering all means to quell protests. The Emergency Regulations Ordinance was first introduced a century ago when the British attempted to control a strike by Chinese sailors. The law hasn't been implemented for more than half a century, but can be invoked in case of emergency, giving the government ultimate powers to change regulations as officials see fit. Two U.S. scientists and a British scientist have won this year's Nobel Prize in Medicine for discovering how the body cells sense and react to oxygen levels. Their research has been honored for paving the way for new strategies to fight diseases, including cancer. Kim Yo-san reports.
This year's Nobel Prize in Medicine has been jointly awarded to 3 scientists for pioneering research into how human cells sense and respond to changes in oxygen levels. The 2019 medicine laureates are William Kaelin and Gregg Semenza from the US and Peter Ratcliffe from the UK. The Nobel Committee said their discoveries paved the way for promising new strategies to fight anemia, cancer, and many other diseases.
The Nobel Assembly at Karolinska Institutet has today decided to award the 2019 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine jointly to William Kaelin, Sir Peter Ratcliffe, and Gregg Semenza for their discoveries of how cells sense and adapt to oxygen availability.
The committee explained the trio's work has greatly expanded knowledge of how physiological responses make life possible, adding such a response is key to many things, including producing red blood cells and fine-tuning the immune system. The Nobel Committee also added that scientists are now focused on developing drugs that can treat diseases by either activating or blocking the body's oxygen-sensing machinery. The winners will share the $918,000 cash prize between the 3 of them. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to destroy Turkey's economy if Turkey goes off limits. This came after his unexpected decision to pull U.S. forces out of Syria. Firing off a flurry of tweets on Monday, Trump justified his decision that could possibly open ways for Turkey to launch an attack on Kurdish fighters across the border. His comments are seen as a move to calm the much criticized withdrawal. Critics, in fact, noted that the withdrawal could facilitate an ISIS resurgence and allow Turkey to attack Kurdish forces. Kurdish forces were America's key allies in defeating the Islamic State in Syria. And as of last month, around 1,000 U.S. troops were operating in northeastern Syria. Hundreds of protesters from the so-called Extinction Rebellion, a climate change activist group, took to the streets in London on Monday for a planned 2-week protest. According to The Guardian, they urged the UK government to take immediate actions to tackle climate change. Westminster Bridge, Lambeth Bridge, Trafalgar Square, Smithfield Market, as well as several roads in Westminster were blocked by the activists. Over 270 arrests have been made by Monday evening, and the group also held an 11-day demonstration in London back in April, which was followed by July protests in 5 cities, including London and Bristol.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information useful for your everyday life. The Seoul city government is going to provide free Wi-Fi in key public and residential areas by the year 2022. It announced plans to raise the city's free Wi-Fi coverage from the current 31% to 100% over the next couple of years. The city plans to set up nearly 24,000 wireless access points in public venues such as parks, parking lots and public transportation areas. The move comes as part of the city's $860 million plan to build a so-called data-free city that encompasses the use of IoT technology. Seoul will become the first metropolitan city in the world to adapt such a system across the entire city. Now, South Korean railroad workers say they will go on a 72-hour strike starting 9 a.m. Friday, following the breakdown of last-minute wage negotiations with management. Preparing for the first strike by the Korea Railway Workers Union in 3 years, the Transport Ministry says it has prepared emergency backup plans. It said substitute workers will operate the KTX high-speed trains and other railways around the capital during peak commuting hours. It also added that buses will be laid on for highly crowded routes in order to minimize passengers' inconvenience. Now, as winds turn chillier and the leaves change colour here in South Korea, many people head up the mountains to enjoy the scenic views. However, hikers are being advised to be extra careful as lots of accidents tend to happen on the nation's mountains around this time of the year. Our Park Se-young with more.
These rescuers are transporting a hiker who fell while climbing Seraksa Mountain. Between September and November every year, when autumn leaves change color, there is a spike in the number of accidents. In the last 5 years, 4 out of 10 mountain accidents in Gangwon-do province happened during autumn season. And climbing down the mountain is more dangerous than climbing up.
I think people lose their footing after drinking alcohol. There are people having a drink up there right now. Drinking makes you lose, you know?
Many people also become dehydrated while hiking. If climbing for 3 to 4 hours, climbers should pack extra clothes, food, and phone battery packs just in case. And because it's difficult to locate off-track hikers in emergency situations, it's important to stay on the designated trails.
Hiking off-track can be very dangerous. Also, remembering or taking photos of signs on trails can help you explain your location if there's an accident.
Hikers should schedule to climb down before sunset and inform family or friends of hiking plans ahead of time. Experts emphasize the need to prepare thoroughly for every hiking trip, regardless of the size of the mountain. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Good morning. Most regions had the coldest morning temperatures of the season so far. Not to mention, today is Hallo, literally translated as cold dew, marking the arrival of cooler temperatures, according to the traditional calendar. But brace yourself for an even colder morning tomorrow. Of course, a lot colder over in Daegwallyeong in Gangwon-do province. But thankfully, many of us will be sleeping in as tomorrow is Hangul Day, which is a national holiday here in Korea. Daily highs, though, will be a couple notches higher than yesterday, Seoul getting up to 19 degrees, Chuncheon topping out at 21 degrees. But don't worry, we're not skipping right into winter. Temperatures will return to seasonal norms, and the skies are forecast to remain mostly sunny for the next 5 days in most parts of the country. Meanwhile, Typhoon Hagibis has gained strength and now it has turned into a super typhoon. And there is a high possibility that it will pose a danger to Japan over the weekend. It's forecast to hit the island of Kyushu, bringing extreme winds and heavy rain. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's where we're going to leave the news and weather for now on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to us here on Arirang TV, and a reminder that our next newscast is coming up at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.